Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another episode in my Time Warp series. This is a series where we take a look at features or things that used to be in the game, but were removed for one reason or another. In this episode, I'd like to talk about the old legendaries and just removed or super rare items in general. There were some interesting items that a lot of people don't know about, so let's get into it. I guess the best place to start is with the very first legendary ever looted, and that's the Talisman of the Binding Shard. This only dropped one time. It was found in the Molten Core raid from one of the bosses, Baron. A horde guild by the name of Nerfed on the Archimon server was lucky enough to get it to drop, and an undead warrior by the name of Noctin was the first person who got it. It was apparently unintended for it to be able to drop, and it was removed from the loot table the first day he looted it. Speculation is that this was the original way you were going to be able to get the Thunder Fury legendary. Some lore behind all of this is that Thunderon, the Prince of the Air Elementals, was betrayed by Ragnaros' lieutenants, Gar and Baron. Ragnaros struck down Thunderon with Sulphurous and consumed most of his essence. The remains were stored within a quote-unquote talisman of elemental binding, and it was shattered into two pieces and given to his two lieutenants. As you know, the way to get Thunder Fury today is by getting two bindings of the Windseeker from Gar and Geddon, but it looks like that this talisman may have been the original way to get it. Perhaps having two halves of the talisman and combining them gave you this necklace and also the sword. But it looks like it's possible that it was switched to the bindings because they didn't want to have too many legendaries. And now we'll never know. Next up we have Atish, the Great Staff of the Guardian. This was the caster legendary for vanilla. It was obtainable in the Naxxramas raid and usable by mages, priests, druids, and warlocks. The way you obtained it was to kill bosses within the raid. Each boss had a chance to drop something called a Splinter of Atish, and if you combined 40 of them, you would get the Frame of Atish, which sent you on a quest. You had to get both the base and the head of Atish to assemble the staff fully. The base dropped from Cthulhu, the final boss of the AQ40 raid, and the head dropped from Kil'Thuzad, the final boss of Naxxramas. So, it was a very difficult thing to do during the vanilla days, and only the best of the best guilds were able to complete it. After you assembled the staff though, there was one more task. You had to bring it to the Stratholme dungeon to purify it. You fight a demon named after the staff, and halfway through the fight he actually dropped a legendary sword for one of your allies to use against him, although it was only temporary and equipable only in Stratholme. Upon defeating the demon, you were able to cleanse his staff, and finally you were able to use it to its full potential. Like I said, equipable by 4 different classes, and it was a pretty big weapon in the lore, kind of like Ashbringer but for casters. It was used by the Guardians of Tirisfal, which is a line of powerful warriors who defended Azeroth against the Burning Legion. It was used by Egwene, Medivh, and it now sits in the hands of Khadgar, and of course a select few who were able to construct it before it was removed. The ability to obtain it vanished along with the original Naxxramas 40-man when it was re-released in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. And while we're on the subject, let's talk about the Corrupted Ashbringer. This one technically isn't a legendary, but it's Rare's one, and hey, when am I ever going to get a chance to talk about this one? This one wasn't as involved as Atish. It was a straight up drop from one of the bosses in the raid, the 4 Horsemen. One of the horsemen, Alexandros Mograine, was the one wielding it. He was one of the leaders of the Silver Hand and the original wielder of the Ashbringer. He was murdered by his son, Renault, and his death corrupted the once holy weapon, giving it a ghoulish appearance. It had a fairly low drop rate, and just like Atish, it became unobtainable once Naxxramas was re-released. This is because Alexandros was replaced by Baron Rivendell in the new version. One of the cool things about it is, if you had it equipped, you would be haunted by the former wielder and would receive whispers periodically. Pretty cool. I'll have scripts to all of them in the description if you want to listen to them in-game. This item also had a special event in the Scarlet Monastery instance. If you went to the cathedral while wielding the sword, there would be a scripted event where Renault Mograine, the current commander of the Scarlet Crusade, welcomes you. The spirit of his father shows up and takes revenge upon him and frees High Inquisitor Fairbanks' spirit. He tells you that Ashbringer is beyond redemption, but says that Morgraine's other son has the ability to forge another one, and that he could be found in the Outland. But alas, that's where the interaction ended. It's thought that the original idea was to be able to follow another legendary quest similar to Atish to be able to get the original Ashbringer somehow. This was fueled by several references to the sword throughout the game and a legendary version found in the game files. It was one of the most debated things for quite a while. Players searched every corner of the world for some hidden quest, both alive and in ghost form several times over, but nothing ever came of it. Instead, the corrupted version was given to Alexandros' other son, Darian. He lost it to Tyrion Fordring at the Light's Hope Chapel, where it was purified to its original form. and it was used by Forging for a few expansions. But those who wanted it did get it several years later in the Legion expansion, where it was the artifact for the Retribution Paladin, including a reworked Corrupted version. Anyways, back to an actual legendary, and next up we have the Black Curare Resonating Crystal. This one is a little different because it was a mount. This was obtainable for a very short time during the Curare opening ceremony. Before you could access this raid, both the Horde and Alliance had to gather supplies for a war effort in Syphilis, and during all of this, you could work on an extremely long and involved quest chain that required you to kill several different raid bosses. At the end, you got a special scepter that you would need to save for later. I'll have a link to the whole quest chain in the description if you're curious. After your server completed the collection portion of the event, 5 days later, if you had the scepter, you were able to bang the gong located outside the raid to start the Silithus invasion. And as an award for all of your hard work, you got the mount along with the Scarblord title. The event lasted for 10 hours, and if anyone else completed the chain and rang the gong within that 10 hours, they would also get the mount and title. This event was so big that to commemorate it, it's recreated on the 21st of January of each year. So, pretty difficult to get. It's the only legendary mount, and of course no longer obtainable since the gates are all open on all servers, and any new server has the gates open already. Next up, we're jumping a few expansions ahead to more recent content, and that's the legendary Pandaria Cloaks. There were 6 cloaks in total, at least one for each type of role, and they were rewarded at the end of a very long quest chain that required you to defeat several raid bosses multiple times. By this time, Blizzard had abandoned the RNG style of obtaining legendaries such as Sulphurous or Thunder Fury. They wanted legendaries to be obtainable with dedication and hard work, not luck. There were about 25 quests total, and the chain was updated with each patch, finally allowing you to complete it in patch 5.4. But when the next expansion, Draenor, launched, the questline was removed so players could no longer get the cloaks. And similarly in Draenor, we have the legendary rings. Now I know a lot of you don't want to talk about this expansion, but hey, it technically belongs in the list, so keep your butt in that seat. We're going to Draenor and you're gonna like it. But in all seriousness, there's really not much to say. The way you obtained these was very similar to that of the Pandaria Cloaks. You did a really long questline spread out between different patches, and slowly but surely your ring increased in power. It required you to do both dungeons and raids, and at the end, Khadgar empowered it and turned it into a legendary. You also got a legendary quality follower for your garrison, Garona Half-Orcan. Using it would buff you and your allies and cause you to deal 25% more damage for 15 seconds, sharing cooldowns with one another. And similar to the Pandaria Cloaks, the questline for this was removed when the next expansion, Legion, was released. So that's about it. We got to some pretty recent stuff there towards the end, but I thought they were still worth covering. It's pretty interesting to see how often these legendaries change. In the beginning it was complete RNG luck, then eventually it started to turn into long sustained grinds, but guaranteed. And now in Legion we have sort of a hybrid. Your chances of getting legendaries are increased over time as you play the game, so it's a guaranteed thing in that regard, but the one you get is completely random. I'm not sure which system I like the most. The one they have right now isn't perfect by any means, but it's an interesting mix of RNG and guaranteed. There's a lot of room for improvement for sure though, and I wonder what it'll be like next expansion. But I'm rambling at this point. To close out, I'd like to say I hope you found the video interesting. Like it if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next episode of Time Warp. Thanks for watching. Peace.